Hi guys, it's that time again. Which is better? And it will be a Primal Fear special. So if you're into like heavy / speed metal or just curious, then this video is definitely for you. And the albums we're going to be looking at are Apocalypse and Rulebreaker. And before I continue, I will be leaving links in the description down below to check out songs by Rotting Christ. And even links to check out my Instagram and Twitter pages. There you get to see what songs I'm listening to, as well as what my band merch collection looks like. So looking at the Apocalypse album, being a band with a fairly clear-cut formula doesn't really veer too far from the standards set by recent metal classics such as Judas Priest's Painkiller, UDO's Time Bomb, and a number of classic offerings of the late 80s and early 90s out of the likes of Running Wild, Gravedigger and Anthem. There is a fair degree of predictability involved in any Primal Fear offerings. Variation is often found in the periphery, with the biggest variable being the level of impact upon the songwriting by guitarist / keyboardist Magnus Carlsen, whose background puts him in more of an AOR leaning power / heavy metal camp and made him something of an unlikely recruit about 10 years prior when the band moved from Nuclear Blast Records to Frontiers Records. He was the handiwork that offered up some of the astoundingly massive epic compositions on the previous outings, such as We Walk Without Fear and One Night in December. To speak nothing for the more cinematic character that this band's output has a whole take on when he replaced Stefan Liebing and guest orchestration man Matthias Ulmer, whose reputation, by the way, in said department in the metal world is beyond repute, as the guy putting forth the symphonic and atmospheric detailing. Suffice to say, this album treads a similar territory to two previous albums from a sonic perspective, although songwriting and structure at play turns back the clock a bit when 16.6 Before the Devil Knows You're Dead introduced the world to Carlsen era of Primal Fear. The stage is set by a highly cinematic and massive instrumental prelude in the lead-off title track Apocalypse that does an effective job at painting musically what the album art itself depicts, with a dash of singing guitar splendor, somewhat reminiscent of Queen. The clock gets wound back further even to the Nuclear Blast days with the onset of New Rise, arguably one of the fastest and most intense speed metal anthems to come out of this band's arsenal, straddling and divide between the band's current sound and the glory days of Nuclear Fire. Slightly less explosive yet compelling nods to the chunky yet speed sound of Painkiller and found in Blood, Sweat and Fear, and also The Ritual, and the album's closer, Cannonball. Pulling ears with high impact riffs, soaring shred happy solos and glass shattering banshee wells. First impressions, it's quite captivating, also proved to be a bit deceiving in the album's case, as the overall bulk of this album takes a more measured and methodical approach that's a bit more along the lines of accepts mid-paced fare. Punchy grooves that such as those that dominate Hell to the Fear, Hounds of Justice and Kings of Madness enjoy a larger share time in the Nuclear Sunlight than most of this band's back catalogue and represent the majority of teaser singles that promote this album, while the bonus material that most core fans of this band will enjoy via the limited edition release of the album In Fight Against All Evil and Into the Fire have more in common with iconic mid-80s out anthems like the sort of vocalist Rush Keepers delivered with his original band Tyrant Pace. This sort of AOR tendency to some of the slower material is likewise mirrored in the album's token ballad Supernova, which mirrors the Dream Theater influences heard on the previous album's ballad The Sky Is Burning, but with a more subdued tone. While the album's longer winded epic Eye of the Storm shows some similarities to We Walk Without Fear, but dials down the dramatic factor and sorts of coast along in a less dynamic yet still largely captivating fashion. There was little place to go other than down following the two masterworks that preceded this album, but thankfully this is a more along the lines of a slight decline rather than a sudden flop into mediocrity. This album isn't so much an exercise in phoning it in, so much as it's an album that focuses a bit less on the fringes and builds up its base. Most of the same people are still involved, including recently recruited studio engineer and producer Jacob Hansen, who provided the mixing expertise on the last two albums, among those of countless other European bands, who largely serves up the same slab of colossal sounding brilliance. Save maybe a less overt keyboard presence, the overall package comes a little short on moments of astounding brilliance, but any fan of this band will be hard pressed to find any flaws. So switching gears, we're going to look at Rulebreaker. This album is powerful yet all too typical reformation of existing traditions. In terms of songwriting and production, this album functions largely as a souped-up sequel to Delivering the Black, playing off some of the established formula of speeding amongst the painkiller, mid-pace crushes except, and the occasional epic nod to Iron Maiden and Halloween that came in with New Religion and have become a staples band sound ever since. They've again employed the engineering services of Jacob Hansen, who's worked with Tyr, PRIMAL, Rulebreaker and countless others, and has brought new meaning to the notion of modern yet masterful. The result is a massive sound that rivals the bombastic character of a number of symphonic acts, despite only occasionally featuring keyboards. But as with any fine piece of metal craftsmanship, the magic that takes place at the refinery would otherwise come to nothing if the existing elements were not already an exercise in raw power. After a rather cinematic yet fleeting barrage of keyboard sounds, the burst of broken glass that age-old take no prisoners approach to speed metal that Primal Fear has always lived on makes its appearance. Angels of Mercy is actually an exercise in showing no mercy at all, as a riff heavier than an anvil and compressed to the point of critical mass rhythm sections explodes into the celebration of metal-infused mayhem. Along for the ride in the fast lane are In Metal We Trust, Constant Heart and Raven Mad. Each one showcases similar displays of busy guitar lines, driving bass and drum work, and a downright astounding vocal display out of Rush Keepers. This guy at the upper end of the tonal spectrum, comprehensible by the human ear, and at the age of 51 is anyone's guess, but from the beginning of this album until the last note fades, he's putting forth a display that could even rival Rob Halford. Naturally, all is not speed and sheer mayhem with this band when considering past offerings, and along with the massive punch this album packs is a degree of nuance and innovation within their already established formula. There are obviously a few obligatory crowd participation oriented mid-tempo rockers such as the title song, the homage to Judas Priest's Breaking the Law and Tears, and the marriage of chunky except riffing with a song nod to the immigrant song of a single The End Is Near. But there are two particular songs where these guys do break the mold ever so slightly. The somewhat Dream Theater inspired ballad, The Sky Is Burning, bears some similarity to the number of past ballads, but is far more memorable. The absolute coup de grace, however, is the towering 10-minute epic We Walk Without Fear, which eclipses the previous forays into quasi-symphonic Iron Maiden post-1983, a Fire in the Darkness and One Night in December, while featuring arguably the most insane dueling guitar shred feast ever shown. Although I am partial to the vintage mastery that it was Nuclear Fired, this is probably the closest that Primal Fear has got to topping that album, and there is definitely a solid case to be made that this is the most vicious album they've ever put out. Most of it deals with what speed metal fanatics already know, but there are very few pleasant surprises along for the ride that should be enough to please those with an originality fetish, barring those expecting the sea levels to recede. This album presents a rule-breaking rebel in classic sense as a levitating biker who lives by his own terms rather than some geeked term musical genius trying to turn equations into speculative nuclear physics into music. That being said, there's nothing wrong with being passionate about music or dressing oneself in leather from head to toe. Like the eagle featured on the album's cover, this music has teeth, so get prepared to tear it up when you listen to this album via the speaker. There you have it, guys. Let me know what you thought was the better album in the comments down below. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.